Hi, it's TT here from My Sacred Blood, and in this video we'll be weighing the pros and the cons of reusable menstrual products. And we're going to be looking at the reusable cloth pad, the reusable menstrual cup, and my favorite sponges. And in the spirit of fairness and honesty and balance, I'm going to be giving you my top 5 pros and my top 5 cons for each of those products. Now, this is all in my humble opinion, and what I find to be a pro, some might find to be a con, and what some might find to be a con, I actually see as a pro. So if there's something that you want to add, if I left something out, or if your pro is my con and vice versa, then please feel free to share it that way. If anyone comes across this video, then they'll have as much information as they need to make an informed decision. So this video was actually inspired by a question that I received under the Pearl Sea Sponge Tampon review that I did a few years ago. And this is by Sunshine Daydream 7, who asks, have you tried menstrual cups? Or have you tried a menstrual cup? Do you prefer the sea sponge over the cup? I've been considering trying a sponge. I have used a cup for about a year now, but I have a long cervix and sometimes have issues with the cup due to this. I was thinking a sponge may be a good alternative. I'll get to the sponge, I'll leave it for last, and I'll explain that and how you can even adjust your sponges so that they fit your cervix. But let me start off with reusable cloth pads. So we'll start off with the pros, and these are not necessarily in any particular order, but we'll start off with the most obvious pro is that it's reusable. It's a sustainable product, so over time it will be cheaper, which is actually my pro number 2. It is cheaper over time. What I would usually pay for a year's worth of disposables, I can take that money and buy me a minimum of 3 years worth of reusable cloth pads. And if you're one who knows how to sew, or even if you just know basic hand stitching, you can actually learn how to make your own. I've actually given it a try. I'm not the best at it. I'm still practicing, but that will make it even cheaper. Pro number 3 is that it's good for the environment. And not just the environment out there, but for your own personal vaginal environment. Pro number 4 is that they are so comfortable. And it also helps during the summer months. If you get sweaty, they work as a great panty liner, panty protector. I'll just throw that in there as pro number 4. But pro number 5 is that they don't stink. If you're good with washing, even if you leave them to soak as you go, like take one off and leave it to soak, even that will prevent it from stinking. So if you care for your pads well, then they don't stink, and that's a pro for me. So let's move on to the cons. Con number 1 is the washing. And this isn't necessarily a con for me, but some might see it as being time consuming or hard on the nails, which it is for me. But I hand wash everything. I hand wash dishes, and I hand wash a lot of stuff. Sometimes if I get my period around the same time as laundry week, then I'll add my reusable pads to the load. But normally I'll have my pretty little pads hanging out to dry. This is not really ideal if you live in a shared space and you don't want anybody up in your business. This I would count as con number 3, is that it's not very discreet. Also, if you go to work or to school, you do have to carry a few pads with you in your little wet bag, and having to walk around with it, although sometimes the wet bags are made so very well that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a wet bag and a purse. So in that sense it would be discreet, but some may not feel very comfortable walking around with the wet bag knowing that there are pads in there, and also may not be comfortable walking around with used pads inside their wet bag. So although this is not a con for me, I'm going to count it as a con. Con number 4, you have to touch your own blood. This may be seen as a con for some who don't want to have anything to do with their menstrual blood. They just much rather use an applicator to stick a tampon up there, throw it all the way, and just get it over with. So that may be seen as a con, the fact that you do have to touch your own blood and see your own blood, and keep your own blood in a wet bag. So con number 5, some might find it expensive to build a collection of reusable menstrual pads. It can take some time also to build your collection. If you try to build your collection all at once, your collection of reusable pads and wet bags, then the cost might seem to be adding up too quickly. So I would advise building your collection over time as you wean yourself off the disposables, so to speak. And this is why we offer the Young Bloods Box Club. You get both disposables, non-toxic and organic disposables, as well as one reusable menstrual cloth pad per month. And then at the end of the year, then you'll have a really good amount of cloth pads, enough to last you throughout your cycle anyway. So that's my shameless little plug there. So let's take a look at the reusable menstrual cup. The pros for the reusable cup is going to be pretty similar to that of the reusable cloth pads. Of course, it is reusable, it's sustainable. And I'm going to add to that, it's easy to wash, it's very easy to care for. And being sustainable, of course, is also going to be cheaper over time. One cup can last you between 5 to 10 years, depending on the make, the model, or the shape, how it fits you. Because the menstrual cup collects blood and doesn't absorb it, this will reduce or pretty much eliminate any chance of you getting toxic shock syndrome. And it may also greatly reduce the risk of pH imbalance within the vagina. They are also very discreet. I think they're the most discreet of the three, because you can go to work in the morning and not even have to change your cup until you get home later in the evening. Very rarely do they have to be changed throughout the day. I would always recommend wearing a liner with any insertable. Pro number 5 is that it reduces the waste of menstrual blood. There are some who may choose to collect their menstrual blood for any number of reasons, for medical research, to use within their garden, some to consume it. So this would be the ideal product to use because you can collect your blood and use it however you so choose. This brings us to the cons. And the con number 1, and this is a con for me, is that finding the right fit can be a little bit tricky, and it may be expensive because you may have to go through a few to get to the one that fits your body. Con number 2 is that it might take some getting used to. You'll have to learn how to insert it and how to remove it, and also how to position it once it's inside you, and also you'll have to get used to the sensation of it being inside you. Because although it's not going to be very noticeable that it's there, you are going to know that it's there, you are going to sense it, so that alone is going to take a bit of getting used to. Especially if you don't cut the stem. The stem can be a con. If you don't find the right fit, it will most likely lead to leakage. And this pretty much goes for any reusable menstrual product, that in the short term, when you're buying something that costs upwards of $40, it's going to seem expensive. Over time, it pays for itself because that's $40 that's going to last you 5 to 10 years. I'm going to count that as a con, but you know, it really isn't. It really is a pro. It pretty much pays for itself within 2 cycles. If you're not comfortable touching your own body, or you just can't stand the sight of your menstrual blood and don't want to be bothered with the rinsing and the washing, then the reusable cup is not going to be the best choice for you, and we're going to count all that as a con. And that's going to be it for the cons. Let's move on to my favorite rump of all, and that is the sea sponge. They are reusable, they are sustainable, that goes without saying. So pro number 1 would be the fact that they are the only insertables that do absorb, but that don't cause irritation of any kind, and also doesn't interfere with the natural pH balance of the vagina. Pro number 2 is, of course, the cost. I've already mentioned that for all the others, but for sea sponges, if you buy a pack of 3, I believe for me, in Canadian dollars, it costs about $30 or so for 3 sponges, and each sponge lasts for about 6 months. Because sea sponges are living organisms, or were once living organisms, they are biodegradable, so you can actually cut them up and put them into your compost. This can also reduce the waste of menstrual blood, because when you wash your sponge, if you rinse your sponge out into a bowl with a mixture of water, you can also use the blood to water your plants, or whatever you so choose. They're not as discreet as the reusable cups might be, but if you're at home or you live in a shared space, then they're discreet enough. The reason why I love the sea sponge so much is that it is so versatile. You can cut it to fit your body. In the future, I will definitely do a video that focuses specifically on adjusting your sponge to fit your cervix. So on to the cons. Con number one is that it only lasts for 6 months, or one sponge lasts for 6 months if you care for it well. So it doesn't last as long as your reusable pads will, and it definitely won't last as long as your reusable cup. Con number two is that it requires accessories, such as the wet bag or a panty liner. Some might see it as a con, having to carry around all that stuff. Con number three is that it needs to be washed before reinserting, so again, in a public place it might not be very discreet. Con number four, again, of course, you're going to have to get familiar with your body, get used to touching it and seeing your own menstrual blood, so that may be seen as a con for some. And then finally, con number five, these sponges are technically not reusable menstrual products. They are reusable products, but in Canada they would be classified, if they were to be classified or accepted as menstrual care products or medical devices, it would be Schedule 4 medical device, I believe, and that's because of the fact that it is made up of a living organism, and that's the reason why they can't be sold as such. They can't be sold as personal care items, and then it's up to the user or the buyer to use it however he or she so chooses. I do wish that they were more readily available and that women had more of a reassurance that they were not going to do any harm. I can reassure you that they won't, because I've been a living guinea pig, but you know, some might want that extra reassurance from the FDA or from Health Canada or whoever your governing body is. So that's definitely a big con. If you don't want to take that big risk, then this is definitely not going to be the one for you. But for me, it is my favorite. It's very versatile. I don't have to go through a whole bunch of trial and error. I know that if it doesn't fit me, I can cut it to fit. I like the fact that I can spend $30 every 6 months. That's good enough for me. That's it for my pros and cons. If there's anything you want to add, if I left something out, or if you want to add a whole bunch more pros for any of the newbies or first timers out there, please do. And I will see you in another video.